Yeah, because they have to build new facilities.
Oh, no, that wouldn't happen. We're not crazy in this country. We don't build new shit unless it's needed, and then they use it for the thing.
Yeah.
Even Expo 67, all the housing and everything turned into co-op housing for people who were willing to live in a fucking piece of shit.
Okay, we're live.
I think there were lots of complaints about the housing this year at the World Cup.
Okay, well, thanks everybody for joining us. We'll see if we can solve all the world's problems again today.
Yeah.
Talking about Thanksgiving in various parts of the world. Canada, pretty much similar to the US, except it's in October rather than November. The UK is every day, all year, because they're so grateful the US is no longer part of the Commonwealth. And the US is just because we know that we're the greatest nation with the best people and we have no problem, right?
Oh, yeah, right.
Yeah, carry on.
What I've never been able to figure out is why it's on Thursday every year.
Just an excuse to have a 4-day weekend.
Oh, okay.
Just to get kind of wound down, ready for the Christmas holiday, you know? Yeah, it used to be the third Thursday, I think. And
Yeah,
it
yeah.
the fourth Thursday. Anyway, what do we got going this week? It seems that Marie Haynes shared something the other day, and it ended up being a post prompted by Danny Sullivan with some new definition from Google about the difference between their algo updates and system updates. Things weren't confusing enough before, so
Yeah.
injected another element of surprise in there. So I'm sure there will be a lot of confusion around what is an algo update and what is a system update until Google says this is not an algo update, this is a system update, which will still mean nothing to most of us. But Danny's post, he shared some links to some I'll drop them in the chat and in the show notes. There are some places you can get more information on it. I can find the chat box.
I know a few people have been working their way through this new documentation, and it doesn't appear to be anything really new in it, apart from nuances on words, how things have changed. And of course, everybody just latches on to that, so they're saying this now and that, and it's the point where that nuance is that you don't really understand the person that's writing what they're actually saying, because we don't know what the back end is. So it's all conjecture. But it's nice to see that they're actually updating some documentation and making it more readable.
Yeah.
Was caffeine a system update or an algo update? System, right?
I don't know.
Because they changed how they indexed and stuff. That's when they brought in time indexing and stuff, right? So that would be a system update, I would think.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
But what does it matter? You know, it all screws with rankings if you're not doing it right. So what does a word mean, you know, when you have to go to your client and say, oh, whoops?
Yeah, indeed. They're talking about a new search coming, and I don't think there is going to be a new search coming as it's been put. It's just going to evolve as usual. Yes, some stuff's going on the back end. They're plugging new bits in the back end, so we're maybe using some machine language to do this that we didn't do before, and bolting bits and pieces on. So when they talk about systems and algo changes, I would imagine that any system change is going to have an effect on algo, and any algo change may be dependent on the systems anyway. So I can't see them actually rolling something out without working on both. I mean, there are 1,000 changes a year. Who knows anyway? It's not like they do it twice a year. We all sit around and wait for it and see what's different. They're just changing all the time. So yeah, interesting, but what are we going to do? Nothing.
That's kind of what I got out of it, Simon, is that, you know, it was a formal declaration. We have these systems, and, you know, you can familiarize yourself with the different systems that we use. But of course, we keep everything secret. So, you know, this is what we're letting you know. And then we do updates, and we do updates to the systems that get. So to me, it was like an announcement, but a non-event.
Basically, it's an update.
An update.
That's so these idiots have something to write about.
That's true.
Not having anything to write about never stopped most of them before, Terry.
Well, that's true. You know, we can just make it up. If they don't tell us, we'll just make it up.
There you go.
Make it up, or we can rehash something we talked about before.
Oh, that one that interested me on the page was the fact that they clearly talked about domains and how they affect ranking. Where are we? So I'm just looking through at the moment. And they've said, actually, they do. So exact match domain does happen, but you can't have best places to eat lunch as your domain because they'll just ignore it. But if you, but it's not in there, but they've got something like football something, then no, that's a indicator that that site's going to be about football, as an example. So I thought that was quite an interesting one because there's been a lot of conjecture about that in the past. People saying yes, they do exact match, and then there are other people saying they don't.
It's a product of the words on the page. It's not like Google has an algorithm that says, "Oh, give this more weight because it's in the title." It's in the title, or it's in the URL,
domain, yeah.
or it's in the domain. Like years ago, we proved it made no difference whether it's in the URL, you know, the directory structure, or if it was part of the domain name. That was proven years ago. So, you know.
Well, you know, the idea of you know, so-called AI determining what the context of a page is isn't really that complex. You know, several years ago when they first came out with the patent that dealt with vectors, word vectors and sentence vectors, Bill and I had a lengthy back and forth on that. And if you look at there's a numeric formularization that you can form, geometric formula basically, for the placement of a vector and the direction of its vector, okay? And you can take a word like home and a word like house or abode, and you'll see that their angle is going to be very similar, but their location on the graph won't necessarily be similar. Okay, they may be greatly displaced from each other. But when you look at the formula of them, they're going to be very, very similar in all but one regard. Okay, that's just the point of origin. So to mathematically determine what's the average of all the vectors, you know, when you take out all the stop words and the garbage crap, you know, get into the meaningful phrases and words, what's the average? You can do the same thing. You can look, because you can look at word, phrase, sentence, paragraph, even an entire page, an entire document, and come up with an average. So now if the average of that document is somewhat similar to another document on the same basic topic or context, then they're going to be largely supportive of each other. Whereas if one of them is saying, this is a true story, and the other one is saying, this is a myth, now you're going to see the average is going to be 180 out, essentially, from the other one. So it's not that difficult for an algorithm to mathematically determine what a page is about. I think probably the trickiest part is knowing which terms to take out of the pot. Beyond just stop words, you know?
I thought it was interesting the other day. I get lost sometimes in Corey Gruber's discussions because it get super technical, but I thought it was really interesting the other day that he talked about how Google perceives verbs and how that makes a difference in how it interprets what is on the page. So whether you have something that is conjecture like might, M-I-G-H-T, you know, versus something that says you must do this, M-U-S-T, you know, that it's going to give a different connotation to that sentence and to the sentence's relationship to everything else that's on that page.
Same goes for nouns, I would think as well.
Yeah, I mean, you know,
That's what it does, is it actually breaks down the language and knows what's a verb, what's a noun, what's an adverb, all that stuff. It knows it.
yeah, so I can put oh man, I'll have to find it, but I just killed about 45 tabs to get here, but I'll find
Only
it.
45?
Oh man, I was like, you know, we want 3 internal links and 3 external links, and it still has to all make sense. So that was an interesting project. Anyway, yeah, so that's why I had so many. I had 2 different browsers, different tabs. It was crazy. That was my morning. Anyway, I'll see if I can find the link to this, just the slides. Just going through the slides for that presentation was pretty interesting. Let me go see if I can find that.
Yeah, I think a lot of SEOs aren't really aware either that with BERT and the way they process the entities on a page, they don't think a lot of people understand. They look at the entities in a corpus, and that's how they're judging relevance, not by how many times an entity is repeated on a page. So sometimes you only have to mention it a couple of times if you have all the other words in it that they're expecting to see. And I don't think that's quite understood very well.
And I think that's the point, is we've got some machines trying to understand language, etc. And for me, if you write really good content, don't try and adjust it for the search engines, because the search engine will eventually catch up with what you're writing.
Yep.
The people who are trying to game it will be adjusting stuff, etc. But eventually they'll lose. They have to keep changing it, and eventually yours will be up the top because yours is well written and it's meaningful, etc. So yeah, it's like just write good content and write it well. Write it as if you're talking to a person. But if I go into a shop and the shop's called Dog Foods Are Us, and I walk in and it's full of thumb spinners, I'm going to sit there and say, what's going on? But if I walk in and it's got pet food in there, I go, okay, this is pet food. Where's the dog section? It makes sense. And that's what all the time they're tweaking and doing this, just steering towards that more natural language and how one speaks. Well, you can very easily and quickly see a well-written piece of content versus one that's been horribly put together through AI or somebody who doesn't speak the language particularly well. And the better the system.
Developersgoogle.com, 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 developersgoogle.com.
Sorry.
Sorry about that. Shut up. I
killed
live
it. I killed it.
links. No, I dropped live links into the chat, and I didn't know it was going to narrate.
Subtle, but I like it.
And I advanced to level 8. Oh, whoop.
I think you can also kind of just trust that Now, in the past, you wouldn't use pronouns and it and them because you wanted the actual keyword so that you got the match and for the relevance. Now Google knows when you're referring to it, you're referring to the entity or whatever it is.
Because it understands the pronouns that refer back to the.
Right. And that allows writers to write more natural. And I think Google can actually pick that up now, that it's more naturally written. And that will be the downfall of AI content.
Yes, Google understands the difference between writing, as you speak, as it were, right? And all that, keyword manipulation stuff. And Google likes text to flow in a natural way and in a thinking way. And I think that's one of the reasons that, if you want the people who come to your website, right? Do you want them to understand what you're talking about, even if it's technical? That if you separate things out into little chunks of information, like 2 or 3 sentences max, it's one, easier to read on the page, all that, how it works on the page, and it creates the white space and blah, blah, blah. But it's also easier for people to remember. So it's people remember little chunks better.
One of the things, going back to your point about Google being able to determine what a noun is, what a verb is, and refer back via the pronouns to what you're talking about when you say it. I saw, and I don't remember who did the study. It wasn't somebody that I know well, but I read a write-up on someone's study a few months back where they actually conducted some tests and pretty convincingly found that Google could also, in the context of an article, if you're talking about this group of people and using the possessive there, that it would understand, because you could talk about group A was more possessive of their area than group B. And Google would determine that when you said there, you meant group A.
Yep.
It wasn't some nebulous idea it was possessive, but of whose? No, it was group A. And they did a number of tests like that, and it was pretty convincing. I mean, you'd have to do it a million times to be able to say it's a fact, but it certainly seemed very indicative that it's gone a lot further in intelligently understanding what you're talking about, at least within sentences. Now, I imagine it's a lot more challenging when you start going between one paragraph and another, or between one sentence and another. But within the sentence, it was doing a pretty darn good job of determining. Where their test did show some confusion on Google's part was when they referred in a paragraph
back
to group A back in the previous paragraph. It lost the plot entirely, because now you've got a possessive pronoun here that can't be referring to anybody because there's nobody there.
Right.
I'm reading so it's reading it one paragraph at a time.
Well,
seems to me that we had, seems to me we had a discussion.
If you look at how they say their cloud program works, it's sentences. It analyzes by sentence.
Yeah, I think even going by paragraph would be extremely challenging.
It's too much stuff in memory for it to, like, it would have to be able to refer back to the whole document, right?
Well, plus the fact, the way that many people write, it's hard enough for you and me to understand what the hell they're trying to say.
Yeah, well,
because
I would question how that happens anyhow without reference back to group A anyhow. Right.
But some people tend to hop around a little bit, think Trump. their thought processes are rather scattered, and because they know what they're thinking, they assume that you know what they're thinking.
Yeah.
And that's kind
Or
of
they're
human.
making up the lie so fast they can't keep it straight.
Yeah, you need to ration your lying. Keep it down to 1%, which he's pretty much held that average.
Well, you can also tell that if you look at how the cloud program that Google has for BERT, it breaks it down by sentences and says this is the salience and all that for this sentence. This is the there was I think it's in 10, not sure. Been a while since I was there, but it breaks it down by sentence that makes it easy to tell whether right, but it does break it down by not necessarily a sentence. Sometimes 2 sentences would be there too, but it seems to be it breaks it down into blocks that it sees as related.
Okay, so now,
Which raises an interesting question. I have heard it said, no opinion as to whether it's really accurate or not, that Google doesn't really take into consideration punctuation. Okay.
No.
But they do recognize the end of a sentence. Okay.
Right.
But like, for instance, a lot of times in a sentence, you will make a statement, semicolon, and then some amplifying remark. Okay. Which obviously, has to refer to that first portion. And Google does make that connection. Whereas whether it's a period, they do sometimes, but not very often.
I've always used semicolons in titles for that reason alone. Is it helps them understand that
it obviously is tied together. Yeah.
Right. And that's how you would also write it on a page, right? A label and then a semicolon and an explanation after it. That's why I started doing it too. Not for SEO, because it just made more sense.
It makes sense for the users, for the readers.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, yeah, I wasn't doing it for SEO.
You look like you were getting ready to say something a minute ago, Simon.
Did I? I was clearing my throat, coughing a bit.
Okay.
No, I was thinking of something a moment ago, but I forgot what it was. But yeah, yes, I would think if they're not doing paragraphs yet, that it won't be long. Will be GPT-4 coming. As an example, is 100 times bigger than GPT-3. You can see how AI is expanding really quickly. So you should have the ability to then actually take bigger blocks of content and go through it and understand what's going on. And it does.
Well, the
context between the blocks is going to be important. When you've got a page of content, you get a better understanding of everything on it as opposed to just the fragments, or as Cindy Crum used to call them, the fraggles. And that way things come together. And as we know that they get people to link it, the Chrome will now allow people to link into certain parts of pages. They're understanding what's going on there. And they can just down to that bit where you've got a link, takes you down to a particular paragraph. You can probably actually say, okay, this bit of the page is important and it's got links to it and that bit hasn't. So that may make a difference in the algorithm.
As the AI chips improve,
yeah,
that will make it easier as well. People don't really realize how much of a role actual hardware has had in how Google has improved. A lot of it you can almost tie directly to improvements in hardware.
Well, there's a tremendous amount of processing power needed to look at the relationship between the sentence A, B, and C in a short paragraph. Okay.
Yep.
And where's the value? Is there really any ROI for them to dedicate that kind of resource consumption and the delay in processing and the storage and all that? I think they probably can, but it might be an exponential increase in resources needed. So if there's no real benefit to it, why would they? That's my personal opinion, because
But I think, being able to put all the paragraphs together and understand the relationship between paragraphs would take a lot more computing power.
Oh, God,
but
yeah.
it would be worth it to better understanding what a page is about.
Well, it would be orders of magnitude greater resources, but I just wonder, for their purposes of answering a search query, do they really care to get that deep into every document? Probably not. Can they? I suspect, yes, they can. I don't, we're not true AI, but we're making progress, leaps and bounds in that direction. And I think that they probably can do more than they typically do. It's just a matter of how many terabytes of RAM do they want to dedicate to giving the ideal response to a certain search query.
I
Yeah.
imagine they've got a plan of what they want to be able to do,
Yeah.
but can't do it yet because of the hardware situation. And it reminds me of back in 2013, Google were building these floating data centers. What happened to those? Floating data centers make sense because you get all that water to cool it underneath. You just pull that cooling water, which means things can run faster and more effectively.
When they first started, all the computers they made internally themselves.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That they made a big deal of mentioning that the cases were made out of Lego.
So yeah, I agree with Terry. I think as the hardware improves, there are jumps in what they can potentially do. So there'll be R&D going on with the algorithms, etc. somewhere, probably a room full of bits wired together, and it's like, well, we can do this now. And it may take a year or two to get down the line into what we see in the SERP before that actually happens, because it's got to go through testing and see what happens when bits go together. But that must be a fascinating area.
Oh yeah. Well, all the research is going into quantum computing.
Yeah.
When you've got a mainframe that can do 1.2 million calculations per second, and then you start talking about something else that can do 45 billion calculations per nanosecond. Now, if you can keep the thing cool enough, you can do a lot more.
Exactly.
I always wondered how, when with passages, because that's definitely sentence oriented, because they can pull something out of a whole page or article that's theoretically basically about something else, but it finds the passage that relates to the query. And I'm like, my God, that is like searching the universe for the right thing.
It's kind of how our brains work as well.
It is how our brains work.
It's when you think of a quote that somebody said out of context.
Supposedly. Not all of our brains work that way, but
Sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes.
Let's give it a sometimes. When you've been working all day and it's night and you're looking at stuff and you're still working, but you look at this stuff and none of it makes sense anymore. And your brain just says, that's it, I quit. You are done for the day.
At night, that's when I first sit down at my computer every day. Now, what am I doing here? I could have been a milkman.
They still have milkmen in England?
Yes and no. So they mostly disappeared. There's a few places that still had them, but they're coming back at the moment. And they're not just delivering milk, they're delivering other things as well. And it makes sense. So within certain cities, there is burgeoning home delivery systems using milk floats, electric vehicles. I mean, we've been doing the ecological electric vehicles for donkey's years, and it almost disappeared.
Oh, do
But
they
yeah,
still
that's
have
kind of
milk
similar.
bottles? They have the bottles, the
No,
glass.
no. People
Oh,
are
no.
asking for those to come back because they're recyclable.
Yeah.
The downside is it costs more to clean them out than it does to pulp them and make new bottles.
Yep, it
Like,
does.
yeah, but people are asking for that. I mean, the Tetra Packs have got too much plastic in, and people buy milk basically in plastic bottles these days. But yeah, the people are definitely asking for glass milk bottles to come back, and I'd love them. They're wonderfully shaped things, and
They are
we've
wonderful.
got a couple in the house that are old ones that my wife used for flower arranging. There's flowers in them. So they're beautiful little things.
Yeah, I did that when I was a kid. After I delivered newspapers, I helped the milkman.
You help the
Excellent.
milkman.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Well, I got paid, of course, but yeah.
Or as a lot of people called him, Dad.
When I was little, it was the transition from to electricity. So when I was little, we still had an ice box, and the way that you kept things cold was this big block of ice would go in, and then the container was kind of insulated, so it kept things cool. And we literally had an iceman who came around with the ice to replace the ice in the ice box. Yeah.
God, how old are you, Zara?
Older than old.
I was going to say that's a lot older than me. Like,
Yeah.
Wait, I missed
I'm
that.
approaching 420, as they say in French.
I missed that, but I find it difficult to understand what could possibly be older than you, other than me.
I am, and
Oh,
yeah.
Doc, do you remember your ice delivery man as well?
Yes, sure do. We had we did have an ice box. It was not a refrigerator.
Yeah, that's what I was just saying exactly
and
that.
My grandmother had one. It was an electric ice box. Okay. They had electricity brought into the house, but there were no electric refrigerators yet. It was an ice box, and the iceman delivered twice a week, but it did have a plug-in light. So when you opened the door, you could actually see what was in there.
Oh, wow. Very
She was
sophisticated. We did not have the light.
unbelievable. Yeah, we had the milk bottles, and it was my chore. We had a little wire basket,
Little
would
wire
hold 6 of
basket,
them.
yeah.
And I was the one that was assigned the responsibility of taking the empties out and setting them on the porch. But the first time I got in a hurry and stumbled and broke 3 bottles of milk, I was no longer allowed to bring the new ones in.
Oh, no. Oh, wow. Oh.
There's quite a few things like that are coming full circle. And when we look back at stuff like that, you think, well, actually, what we've replaced those things with aren't sustainable. But those things we had in those days were sustainable. They had to be. Yeah. But we didn't think about them being sustainable. It was just like you gave the bottle back so they could fill it up and bring it back.
Yeah, it was just how you got it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The same way with going to the Coke machine and dropping in your nickel and getting a little Coke. You had to stand out there and drink it, or else pay a deposit to take the bottle with you.
Take the bottle, yeah. Yeah. So guys, I'm gonna leave early today because of my Thanksgiving schedule. I have a live event at noon, and I'm going to take a break before I plug into that. Always fun chatting with all of you. And Doc, happy Thanksgiving. Simon and Terry, you can celebrate that you're not with us.
That you're not the 51st state.
We're with you in spirit.
Right.
It's so dead. It's like a holiday here. I've never worked on American Thanksgiving. There's nothing going on. for the whole week usually.
And now I can go shopping for a router for my wood shop.
Excellent.
Ciao.
Later, sir.
Have a lovely time. Have a
Thank
lovely Thanksgiving.
Yeah, thank you.
So Doc,
Yeah.
the last few days and today there was a thing by Rusty Brick saying that Google doesn't penalize for mistakes in schema.
Well, yeah, and I agree with that. They don't penalize. However,
Uh.
they also don't render any benefit for the schema. If
However, how did I get a manual penalty for that? About when I was working for Telsec, I gave the site up for a while. Another company put ratings on every page, and Google did a manual penalty across the lot for that particular thing.
They manually added ratings that weren't actually from another third-party source.
Excuse me?
So they were they manually added ratings?
No,
that
they
weren't-
were Google ratings. They weren't being updated though, and they were on every page. So it looked like a service the company was providing had that rating.
Yep.
Okay, so to say that they don't penalize it is incorrect, because
Yeah, I think it's one of those. The ratings one is one of those little bits that's slightly different, isn't it? Because it happens to be part of schema, but they don't penalize you getting your business name wrong. They probably actually they just shut down your GMB. But the ratings I think is probably one you could put brackets around and say, except for this.
right.
I agree, because your rankings are so prevalent in abuse.
The ratings, you mean?
The ratings, yeah,
Yeah.
in abuse efforts, and I think they look at that in a different light than they do because it's schema. It happens to be schema, but they're
Right.
more interested in the fact that it's a rating.
That's also shortly after that, they also stopped using ratings that you put on your site. Has to come from a third party now.
Well, you remember when they
Yeah.
first came out with Smart Snippet, and where you could get a smart snippet by using schema. There was, at that point, they said that any abuse, we will penalize you, and you will never be reinstated to get smart snippets again.
Do you mean featured snippet?
No, just a smart snippet in the SERP.
Okay, I've never heard of this.
They said that if you're caught in abuse of this, we will take away your ability to get a smart snippet, and you will not be reinstated, period, ever.
Well, they reinstated this site, and it was quick. I fixed it one day in the morning, and in the afternoon, it was already approved and the
Excellent.
rankings all come back immediately. That's an easy thing to check, right? They just have to run crawler over the pages that they knew had ratings on them and knew you were good. But that came from Google, right? I read it, Marie Haynes actually wrote about it, and so did Rusty on that other place. I forget the name.
Surgeons Roundtable.
Yeah, I don't like to promote that place. And right away I thought, no, that's incorrect. Like when you say they'll never do it, don't ever say never.
Well, it may also be that that their policy has changed, because I know that their policy did change on the smart snippet thing, for instance, that I mentioned. I don't remember. It's been several years ago.
Yeah.
But they did change that policy. Just like, remember when Matt was always promoting guest blogging, and then
That's changed.
wait, I never said that. But they gave us a year and a half worth of warnings that they were going to be reversing that. They don't very often reverse their course. There's only been a couple things that I can recall where they have, but they may have changed their entire outlook on.
Like, I think for sure, if you just made a mistake in the schema, they're not going to do anything other than ignore it. However, if they think you're trying to screw with them,
This is
I would say that's the exception to the
that
rule.
falls into the fuck around and find out category.
Yes, yes. As I like to say, more SEOs have shit the bed underestimating Google than anything else.
Yep.
I'm just thinking that they're giving us more and more all the time in Google Search Console. So I would expect to see that sort of stuff in there fairly shortly, because I know there's more stuff to come. And all the time they do that. So I would expect to see schema stuff in there as well. I think some there already.
Yeah, they do tell you if you have an error in the way you've implemented it, they tell you that.
Do they give you any definition
that's
of
this
what the
year, isn't
error
it?
is, though?
Pardon me?
Usually
Do they give
they
you
give
any
some they do
definition?
give some hints, don't they? Yeah.
I've
Not-
never had that issue.
I don't think down to the nth degree, but it'll be a page, and then even if it's just a page, you can grab that, go and work out what's going wrong fairly quickly and easily through a schema.
Yeah, I think they point you to their page on implementing schema when they find something they don't like.
I think it's more than that. I think they actually tell you which bit of the schema is wrong, because I've had something a couple 2 or 3 months ago, but I had an email from GSE saying something was wrong with some schema. And if I remember rightly, they told me what it was, but not how to fix it, and it was an easy fix.
The one time that I've seen that, they point you, like Terry said, they point you to their directory over here on how to. That's like telling me you've misspelled a word in your document. If you want to know how that word is spelled properly, here's a dictionary.
The dictionary.
Yeah. I mean, because they send you the thing for schema, which is 144 pages of everything you can possibly do with schema, and that really doesn't tell me much. Okay.
Oh, they do have pretty good guidelines for schema if you get the right page.
Yeah, if you get the right page.
Everyone that they support, every schema that they support is documented there, exactly how to use it. Very good resource.
I was very pleased they didn't get rid of the validator. Well, they did get rid of it. It went over to schema.org, didn't it? And they hosted it, now host it. Because I use that a lot, just by, it's all very well, because they replaced it with the rich text tool. That didn't allow me to go in and just try stuff. And when you're trying to compact several schemas together as one block, as opposed to lots of separate ones, chucking it through a validator is very, very useful. And you couldn't do that with the rich schema tool, which is fine. It's good once the page is sorted, but actually writing the stuff in the first place isn't particularly easy. So as you're sticking it into the validator, I quite often would be in there working it out. What have I done wrong? And usually I've missed a comma somewhere, which is so annoying.
That's all it takes.
You have to watch it though, because schema validator doesn't always match Google's.
Oh, that's true. Yes, but then but if you put something in which is in schema, but Google doesn't yet use it, it's not going to do you any harm. And there could be other search stuff out there that is going to pick that up and use it, possibly even your own internal search, which is very, very useful.
Yeah, that's why I've never understood why they don't use the service schema. They tell everyone to just use product. I've started just mixing the two, have the service schema there, and then in another block, the product and offer part of it.
I'd love a tool, if anybody's watching this, that I could put a URL to a page in and it comes back and tells me what sort of schema I should have for the content on that page. Sometimes it's
the-
obvious. If you've got products, I'd love somebody to build that for me. Just press a button or put a URL and say, right, what have I got on this page that actually deserves a schema? It could come back and tell me stuff. Oh, you mentioned a book on here. Have a book schema. I don't know. It's all right when you've got a product page and you're doing product schema, etc. But there's all sorts of other stuff, all sorts of fantastic stuff in the schema, which you could be putting on, but we just don't know.
People don't use about and mentions enough, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Mentions I like especially because if you're mentioning a whole bunch of different products or mention like writing a thing on WordPress themes and WordPress plugins, you want to have those entities and refer back to Wikipedia so they know what you're talking about. That leads exactly. They know exactly what you're talking about.
And I see very few people using same as too.
Same as they've kind of, I believe that's one that they said you don't have to use it anymore. We figured it out. That's why when you see if you put a company name in now, their LinkedIn, if they have LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, they'll probably list them all right in the first page of the search. And that's without the same as, because they figured that out.
But isn't that one of the things they've been using the same as to do in the first place until they trained it all well enough so that they don't need the schema? Because I know long term people are saying, well, eventually they won't need schema at all, and we've just trained Google's AI to
we shouldn't complain about. I never complain. Some SEOs think that's they're making us do the work. No, you dummy, we're helping them in the work.
Exactly. We are improving the world.
Yes. You know, that's always been my philosophy is you have to do a good job. Is that if you make a SERP weaker, you aren't a good SEO. You're a spam.
Exactly.
Some people plant trees. I use schema.
I actually do both.
Yeah.
Yes.
I used to put the markup in the page and use JSON at the same time.
Yeah, I used to use item props and stuff when I used to code up and stuff, but JSON's so much easier once you know what you're doing.
Yeah.
It's like...
Actually, JSON is much easier to implement than
It really is.
doing it right in the page with the markup. A huge difference, especially when you're trying to do it programmatically.
Yeah.
Night and day as far as implementation.
And on a big scale as well, you can actually run separate systems to actually content manage your JSON away from your content, normal content management stuff. So you can have an SEO team that are literally doing the schema JSON separately. And where I did this previously, where we weren't able to get our dev team to build us a proper schema tool within our site, they said it's going to be at least 12 months because our books fill up, and said, right, we'll go and build something ourselves. And we actually built a set of spreadsheets, Excel spreadsheets, where we would build all the JSON for all the pages and then stick that in one file in the system and then tell Google where it was, which worked absolutely fine. So it wasn't actually even on the page.
Oh, wow.
And you can do that. Yes, you can tell Google where it all is.
So almost like CSS.
Yes, like CSS, but also like a sitemap in a way. You can have a sitemap wherever you want. Sitemap.xml. Yeah, you can do that. And in some cases, most sites, it's not an issue, and most sites have got the ability to stick schema on the page. You can do it. But when you've got a big corporate site, and you can't, it's not built in already in this particular case, it was Sitecore. So they could build it. It wasn't an issue. But we did have the developers time to do it within 12 months. We needed it straight away. So it took us a month or two to do it, get it all ready. But yeah. There are ways around most things.
I built an app that puts schema into WordPress and uses a lot of the WordPress data in order to do it.
Yeah.
So publish date, author, publisher, all that stuff. And then I have a few fields to flesh it out. And then it just writes a schema based on the fields that are there.
Oh, that's the ideal way of doing it programmatically, because then, yeah, you just, and that's how I do it normally with the CMSs I use. That's how you should be doing it.
Mhm.
It's at the page level and it doesn't do it automatically, but it's a lot quicker when you just have to put a word in and it knows, okay, how to program around that, use that field.
The only downside I see to that approach is that if somebody comes along and wants to hire you to move that WordPress site to some other platform,
Wix,
yeah, for instance, you know,
for instance, yeah.
God knows why anybody would want to do that, but
Oh,
you know,
there's a discussion for next week.
If you're actually
But that would be true for anything on WordPress. Basically.
No, not at all. There's an awful lot of WordPress that will move very nicely to other CMSs.
Yeah.
But if you're pulling information out of the WordPress architecture to use in your markup, I think that there's probably a good chance you're going to lose that schema markup on any kind of a migration to someplace other than WordPress. Okay.
Yeah.
And then, you know, that's the only downside I see to it. You know, I like your idea though of actually hiding it someplace and just telling Google where to find it. I've not
The other massive advantage of it, the big advantage of that as well, is that competitors can't find it.
This is true.
They think, oh, they haven't got any markup. Oh, yes, we have.
Well, they could find it by finding the path to it on like you got to have a path to it on the page, don't you?
No.
How would Google find it if it wasn't in the page?
Because you put it into, I think it's in GSC somewhere. Or maybe you do. Actually, maybe you do. Maybe you're right. I can't remember. It was a few years ago. Oh, that's very good. I'm going to have to look that up now.
Wouldn't you use a rel link like you would with CSS?
That would make sense. But I think we did it by adding something into GSC somewhere. There may have been the old GSC, but let's have a look.
Oh. Into the search console directly.
Yeah.
Basically,
That's why I think you can hide
as
it.
a sitemap, or
yeah, but like you do with a sitemap, and you could hide a sitemap completely from competitors by not calling it sitemap.xml, but sticking it at several folders down, call it something else completely, and then telling GSC where it is,
yeah,
and they'll never see it.
I saw that one time because I had a client a couple of years ago. When I first looked at their site, I looked for a sitemap, and they didn't have one. So I said, you know, you should really have a sitemap. Oh, we do. And he actually sent me a file copy of it. I said, wait, where the hell is it? That's a secret. But it was an e-com site. They didn't want their competitors to see all
it.
that stuff.
That makes sense.
Yeah. He never would tell me precisely where they hid it, but it was there.
So I remember in the old GSC, like the Webmaster Tool version, you could tell it, here's my file, and put a copy in there and then tell it this is where you go to see it.
You could actually upload a file or give them a link. Yeah.
Right. And that's what I used to do. I used to upload directly to Google every month. And I believe it was partially responsible for high indexing rates.
Good chance. At least in those days, yeah.
Well, they knew that the map was being maintained.
Yeah.
Interesting one, that as well. little chat on Mastodon earlier with somebody, and I did look this up, but I did remember back of my head. But having redirects in your sitemap will mean Google will not trust your sitemap as much. So every time it finds 404s or 300s, basically not 200s, it's going to go, this isn't quite the quality that we hope for. It just wants a set of 200s.
Well,
and that's it.
certainly doesn't indicate that that sitemap is being well maintained, does it?
Exactly, which is what made me think.
Oh, so you're saying you have to remove the original page and just put in the page that you're redirecting to?
Yeah, don't have anything that's going to give Google a 301 or a 302 or a 404. Just get them out of the sitemap. If you've got an automated sitemap, hopefully it should be doing it anyway, but sometimes they don't, depending upon what's set up. And so I've seen situations where you've got an automated sitemap which is just churning out 404s and 301s, and it's like, well, that's not good.
That happens if you're using Screaming Frog to make your sitemap. It includes the original page with the redirect in it too.
Oh.
I think you can turn that off. I think you can. There's a button you can press 200s only. I've certainly used Screaming Frog as a temporary thing while I'm waiting to do bits and pieces, and it's fine. But yeah, it makes sense to me, because Google sit there going, why am I wasting my time? You're telling me to go to this page and you're just then redirecting me to another one. I'm not going to trust this site as much, therefore I'm not going to crawl it as much, and it will probably not get visited so often. So every time you're updating stuff, why am I taking a week or two to get this updated? But of course, then one should be going into GSE and telling Google that you've updated a page anyway, using the tool in there. But maybe you've got millions of pages, and that's not an option. Yeah, I think that's an interesting little one.
I'll have to check that. Make sure that Screaming Frog isn't doing that, but I have a feeling that it does do that, unless you tell it.
I think there's an option in there. Yeah, I think there's an option in there where I think, looking at it now. Yeah, so there's a box that you have to press for no index pages, or canonicalized, or page. There's tick boxes in it when you.
Okay, so where you do the pagination and stuff as well, right?
Yeah, and there's also response codes you can turn on and off, and by default the 200s are ticked, and then you've got boxes no response, blocked by robots, 3x's, 4x's, and 5x's, and unless they're ticked, they're not going to be in the sitemap. And why anybody would want to tick those?
Yeah, you would think that they would default to the 200 only setting.
They do.
Okay.
They do. They do. I've just opened it up and had a look.
Okay, but I used to use Screaming Frog for things where I would want that information.
Fair enough. Which is why they got the boxes for you to
doing
tick.
content. Like I used to find new content by looking at the last mod date.
Makes sense.
But then you're counting on the server having the right last mod date. And that can be few and far between sometimes.
I think that's also in the internal report as well. And I think you can just output the internal report and sort it by that, which is very, very useful.
Yeah. Especially when you have clients who don't tell you when they're publishing content.
This is true, and this is why I use some services on the web that tell me when pages change, and I get an email saying this page has changed, and I just keep an eye on the clients, some of my clients like that.
Or they
screwed up now.
Page and it tells you that too.
Yeah.
Well, we're at the top of the hour. Anything else we need to cover before we?
Twitter's still there.
Yeah.
We'll check again next week.
Yeah, I was going to say, you think we'll make it to next week?
Probably, but the stuff I've seen on there in the last couple of days, it's really. I thought it was a cesspit already. It's getting worse. It's just horrible.
Doesn't look promising, does it?
No, it's just. I mean, fortunately, I don't use the Twitter app. It's when when I click something and open up Twitter on the web, you just see all this stuff there. Go, why do people suffer from this? I used TweetDeck, or there's another version because TweetDeck's web only now, but there's a desktop version called Tweeten, which is like, it's basically somebody's built it because TweetDeck was going, and I just have columns of stuff that I follow by the hash stuff, etc. Unfortunately, because of that, there's no advertising in it, and there's no other bits and pieces that I want to see. So I just get my SEO stuff and a few friends' bits and pieces. So I'm quite curated to what I see. I'm quite sheltered and blinkered on that. And it's every time I go to the twitter.com site, I go, oh my God, this is horrible.
What's that program called?
Tweeten. Taking it in.
That's a takeoff on TweetDeck, yeah.
Yeah, basically somebody's gone and recoded TweetDeck because Twitter owned TweetDeck, and they've now put it as a subdomain of Twitter. So it's tweetdeck.twitter.com. So you can only look at it on the as a web service now, and they used to have a desktop app for it, but they decided they didn't want to support it anymore.
Oh, I loved TweetDeck when it was a desktop.
I did too.
For managing campaigns, it was awesome.
I could never warm up to Hootsuite. It just seemed cumbersome as ridiculous.
Hate it with a passion.
But
Doesn't work
TweetDeck
most
was
of the
nice.
time.
Yeah. Well, thanks guys for joining in again. And
Always a pleasure.
We'll see y'all next week, and we can determine whether Twitter is still twitting.
And have a very lovely Thanksgiving, Doc, while we celebrate the lack of America being part of the Commonwealth. Cheers.
And we got rid of you bloody elites. So. You guys take care. Have a good day.
Yeah.